Tell us a little more about how you think that marriage has changed in a way that can accommodate infidelity. I mean, do you see a time where infidelity is just part of what we call the cycle of relationships?
You know, when we look at the institution of marriage, there seems to be sometimes we look at it, I would call it myopically. We tend to look at it at this place in time and believe that's the only way it's ever been crafted. And I think that's not realistic. You know, not that long ago, we married mostly by arrangement. This marrying for love is a very recent modern phenomenon, if you will, you know. And so here we sit kind of, and what we're learning is this marriage for love comes with a really heavy price tag, which is we divorce in way greater numbers than we ever anticipated. You know, I think we're just caught in the middle of a changing institution. And so we're marrying much, much later than we used to 50 years ago, if at all sometimes, right? We cohabitate more often, those things. Now, one could argue, and I think it's a fair argument, that listen, if you manage to turn to your partner and say, hey, honey, I think we should maybe explore something different from a sexual perspective, that's an incredibly, incredibly trusting level of communication. And so if you're a great communicator, maybe you're just going to be way more successful in your marriage for a whole host of reasons.
What do you think that people want from relationships today?
Well, I think, Dr. Eve, you have to first look at, you know, where did this notion of monogamy come from? Because no biologist who joined your show or joined this conversation would say, you know, it's genetically, we're not predisposed to that. In fact, we probably are predisposed to a different kind of behavior. And so it was obviously a construct we came up with. But really, the construct was a possession construct, right? You know, women were a man's possession. And so that's so much of where this still comes from, right? That this institution, we wanted to be able to pass on our land, our holdings to our own progeny. We needed to know that they were ours. And so we wanted to make rules around monogamy, and women were ours, and you know, that's just the way it was created. And so that notion to some degree exists today.
Do you think that it is destructive to marriages? People
for sure. For sure, I do. You know, I genuinely think that, you know, again, I've been in this business for a decade, so it seems like a long time. But marriages have a lot longer legs than that. And so we've seen incredible evolutions of marriages with infidelity attached to them. You know, Bill and Hillary Clinton are a great example of that. Maybe the world's most well-known couple on some levels, and certainly as public an infidelity situation as you've ever seen. But yet they managed to somehow use that as a springboard to something that appears to be much more successful. Like nobody would call them an unsuccessful couple. And so to have that part of that history, like anything else in life, business, friendships, you learn from your mistakes. And so infidelity can be a launching pad to something better and greater. But I don't think you can plan to be, you know, 15 years into your marriage, find yourself in an emotional or physical affair with somebody else, and believe that you can sustain that, those two lives, those two personalities for 30 more years. That isn't a realistic thing. You're either going to have to come back and rededicate yourself to your marriage, or you're going to probably have to move on. I do believe that's the case. There's nobody I've ever met who says, I've been having a 45-year affair